Welcome back to another episode of Geek Toolkit. In this episode, we're going to take this figure right here and we're going to animate him. To do that, we've got to bring the figure into the computer and we're going to generate what's called a 3D mesh. 3D mesh is the model of this figure in the computer that we can then manipulate. We'll clean up the mesh and we'll make it a bit simpler so it's a little bit easier on the computer to animate. Then we're going to bring it into another application that animates it. And then finally, we'll bring it in augmented reality. This is what the final result will look like. Okay, now that you've seen the demo, I want to explain a couple of things. The main one being, that may not be something that you're interested in doing. And that's okay. That's really not the point of my channel or this video. My channel is called Geek Toolkit because I was very passionate about teaching others technologies. And I learned a lot of my technologies piecemeal. I learned a bit about Arduino. I learned a bit about a Raspberry Pi. I learned about two-way mirrors. I learned about conformal coatings. And then I started stitching things together. And I said, well, I can make this LED light up with this Arduino and I can waterproof it. And that's how things like the LED pathway were born, which you can see on my channel. Two-way mirrors led me to the Mini Magic mirror and the two-way mirror that I showed in the front of my room. And the Dynaframe came out of the Raspberry Pi work I did, plus Python. So each of those technologies is something that I've paired up with something else to make something that I thought was cool. In this one, we're going to talk about 4 technologies. And even though you may not go through the path, knowing the 4 technologies will add to your Geek Toolkit to allow you to do very powerful things. For instance, to bring this character into a computer to 3D model this, we're going to use a technology called photogrammetry. Learning actual 3D modeling might take quite a bit of time, I would say years of studying and work to really get good enough to 3D model this. But we're going to do it in, maybe less than an hour by taking a bunch of photos of this object and bringing it into a tool and using photogrammetry. It will take those 2D images and generate a 3D character. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to what's called decimate that mesh, which makes it much simpler. Then we'll bring it in to an app called an autorigger, which will rig the mesh and animate it. Finally, we'll use augmented reality to show the final video. Now, each of those 4 tools can be used for different things. For instance, the bringing in of a 3D mesh for photogrammetry, you could imagine going out and seeing something in the outside, an art piece or a statue or something that you want to 3D print. Photogrammetry would allow you to bring that 3D model in and send it to your printer. The rigging and animation, you might want to use that for making video games. So you could download a character, build a character, take a character somebody makes for you or whatever, and you'll be able to use that geek tool of auto rigging to animate that character. You could bring them into Unreal or Unity and do some really cool stuff with them. So that's just a little bit of background to why I created Geek Toolkit and why I thought this video would be fun. Now for me, for the video and for entertaining my viewers, I try to do cool stuff that I think is either humorous or entertaining. And what could really be more entertaining than making this guy dance? So here we go. The first step, photogrammetry. Okay, this is the software we're going to use for photogrammetry. It's open source. It's backed by a setup called Alice Vision, which is an engine that does quite a bit of image analysis. You can see in the left-hand pane here, these are my images. I simply took them from a folder of images and drug them over there. What's cool about this process is if I want to add more images later and reprocess them, I can. This is basically drag, run through it again. It'll actually continue from where it left off. Just make sure once you've dragged the files over, make sure you save your project. That way it has something to continue from. These images, you can see the character, the arms are out. This is called a T-pose. I went around the body, I did some close-ups. I didn't have to have the entire character in every shot. But I also do have some shots of the entire character that I went around first, and then I went in close for details. The character is fairly evenly lit. I try to get rid of these shiny spots as much as I can, but definitely make sure there's no harsh shadows, so you don't want a directional light. You can see I put him on a kitchen counter because my lighting there was a lot better than like kind of my spotlight filming area. And so I'm just kind of just showing some of the shots I got, and make sure you get them from front, back, and so on. You'll notice that there's not a lot of shots of the back of the calves here, and that ends up being a problem. So I'll show you that. See, I got it here and I caught this side, but I didn't catch the opposite of this photo. I'll show you why that's important. Once you have your photos, the first thing you want to do is right click here on Structure for Motion and hit Compute. I'm going to link to a video by Prusa, who did an excellent video on this software and some tips on both capturing your photos, but also how to use this. The Structure for Motion on my 980 Ti takes me, I think I want to say about 5 or 10 minutes. And it will get you a point cloud over here, which is very important, so that you can see, are all of these parts filled in? If they are, then you can go ahead and either right click on texturing and hit Compute to do the full setup, or you can just hit Start up here. What I'm going to do is use some editing software, or editing video magic, to jump forward to what it looks like after you've done the full texturing, because that took my computer about 6 or 7 hours to do overnight. Okay, so we've jumped to where I've actually got everything. I've already gone through the pipeline. And you can see over here on the right, we've got the point cloud. So I'm using the left mouse button to zoom around here. And I'm slowly zooming in, and then I'm going to use the middle mouse button to kind of move. And this is what it looks like. It doesn't look so impressive right off the bat, but what's going on here, sorry, forgive me as I stumble around this. I'm going to use this to shrink the cameras down and get them out of the way. These little white dots are the cameras, and if you click on a camera, I made them too small. If you click on a camera, then it will show you that angle. So it's actually calculating from these pictures where the cameras are and letting you show you, basically letting you see the orientation of the camera and the image that it got. This here is called the point cloud, and I'm going to shrink those down a little bit as well. Now this is a very important step. This is what happens when you right click on Structure for Motion and you hit Generate. This is at 5 or 10 minutes. This isn't the full thing. But what I want to show you here, I'm going to make the cameras infinitely small just to get them out of the way. You can see I've got some gaps here. What I can do now is I can go back to the model, make sure you don't move it during this process, run this Structure for Motion, find these gaps, take photos of these areas, and then just drag them back over here and then hit Start again. It'll continue, or I'm sorry, not hit Start, hit Structure for Motion, Compute, right click, hit Compute. It'll run this part of the setup, which is the faster part, and then you'll get an updated point cloud. The texture on the bottom, all of these dots here are the table. We're going to get rid of those later when we generate our mesh, but that's fine. Now here's what I missed that I want to point out because I want you to learn from my mistake. If you look at the back of the calves, they are absolutely gone here. I thought I had enough detail. I could see some dots there, but they are actually not filled in well at all. I should have taken more photos there. Okay, so this window reflects where you've selected. So if I go to texturing, and I'm going to double click on texturing, you see it shows up over here on the right. There's a Structure for Motion. I'm going to click that to hide it. And I'm going to select texturing. And what's happening now is it's loading the model. And there we go. Now we have our model. There's that calf I was talking about. See how it's just gone? There you go. It's a bit clearer. So this is the model after it's been processed, and I'll show you the processing steps, but I just wanted to show that that hole there I wish I had taken photos of. Now the good news is this doesn't look bad for somebody that doesn't know how to 3D model. This is definitely workable. See the texturing, the mask, all of that came in. You can do quite a bit with this. Now, if I was a 3D modeler, I might be able to use this to get a basic texture map. But as a hobbyist, I just wanted something that was mostly 3D rendered, and that's what we ended up with. From here, we can say File, make sure your project's saved, and then in your folder, you're going to have a cache. And inside that cache, you're going to have all of these folders. These folders map to each of these steps. The texturing one, when you go there, you'll have a GUID. I have two because I had photos, I generated a model, and then I added photos, and I generated a new one. These are the files that are there. There's a couple log files. These are textures. They look kind of crazy. They look like this. They're not terribly useful for me at that stage, but this OBJ file, this object file, that is super useful because you can open that up in other programs, and that's what we're going to do next. We're going to talk about how to clean up that OBJ that gets generated and get rid of basically this table and all of the stuff we don't want around here. Okay, so next up is cleanup and decimation. Okay, for the next step, we want to get rid of that table. And so I'm using an app called Mesh Lab, which is another free app that is great for 3D printers because, or people that want to 3D print something, it just allows you to edit a mesh. This doesn't look like much yet, but what I'm going to do is left click and rotate around. And here you can see our figure on the table. This is what things look like before they're cleaned up. And you can see I can zoom in on the model and get a really nice clean view here. You can also see my table and then some of the stuff in the background that it's almost like art actually. It just kind of got rendered kind of goofy. This looks like oranges and bananas. This was the fruit bowl that was in the back. And I believe these are chairs. Okay, so what we want to do is get a view where you can make a rectangle and cut a bunch of this out. And every time you cut this stuff out, things will be a little bit better because you'll have a lot less rectangles to render. So up here on the top row, this icon here, it's the second reddish one. This one will let you select faces. And what it does is you just kind of click and drag, you make a rectangle. And here we've selected a bunch of faces and vertexes. And then of these three right here, I normally click the one in the middle, or I just click the delete key and boom, they're gone. So now we can go a little bit faster and we can just kind of show this process. And you just want to make sure you don't hit your model. So I will hit all four sides here. And this is a lot of the cleanup steps that you have to do when you're done just to get rid of all that stuff. But it's very simple. Of all the apps that I use, this was the simplest way I found to do it. And now let's rotate and zoom in, and now we've just got a little platform here. You can see there's that leg that I keep talking about. And I'm just gonna rotate it so he's dead on, and I'll select it like this. We'll get actually, let's do this. We'll get rid of this side and this side here. Do the same thing over on this side. And this is basically my approach to clean this up, is just kind of chunk away at it until I get everything as small as possible. And then I'm going to do a dead on rectangle here. I'll take a little bit of the feet off, as little as I can. I'm going to rotate it just a little bit more. I'm not happy with that. We can delete this in the middle. There we go. A little bit more and those will be gone. From here, we're going to export the mesh out and we're going to load it into Blender, and we'll simplify it even further because while we've gotten rid of thousands of triangles now and we've got it down to our figure, it's not quite where we're going to want it. Oh, he's got some skis on the back end. Let's get rid of those. There we go. But that's it. That's the process. And you know, you can go a little bit slower with your mesh and a little bit more careful. I'm just doing this for filming. But at the end of the day, this is where you want to be. You want to have things cleaned up. You want to get that table. And you just want to be editing this one model. I'm just taking another quick look at both marveling at how clean the model is, but also noticing some of the defects like the hand here and the bumpiness. But again, when the character is like this big, looks pretty good. Okay, let's move on to the next step. We're going to load them up in Blender. So we'll go File and we'll export the mesh. And we want to make sure that the texture is there. Here's all the textures, and we will export it and go on to the next part. Okay, for this one, we're going to load the free software called Blender. This is a 3D do-it-all software. You can model and sculpt and animate and do some amazing things in Blender. I'm honestly not that great at Blender, so I'll walk you through the basics of it for what we're going to use it for. This is a default scene that loaded. You can see there's a light and there's a cube here. And over here on the right, you can see each of these things. And what you want to do is just get rid of them. We don't want lights or anything for the model we're about to work with. Now I'm going to go to File and I'm going to Import. And I'm going to select OBJ. Then we're going to find the file. And we're going to load the OBJ file. We'll import that, and I'm going to pause while that happens. Okay, so this is what happens when you load a file. It's a terrible orientation, so we want the character here. When I click on him and it selects in yellow, I can now go to Object, Set Origin, Geometry to Origin. Now he's here, and I can rotate him and try to make him face forward, which is super handy. I selected the rotate tool over here, and that rotates him, gives me the rotate movement here, but then if I middle mouse click, I can rotate and try to get him facing the way I want. So I'm mousing over this blue line that lets me rotate him in this axis. And now I'm going to click this arrow and move him up. And I can see that when I rotate him, he's leaning back a little bit. I actually had him, it's an action figure standing up, so he is a little bit awkwardly placed, but that's okay. Oh. I kind of call this part aligning the spaceman because it's like you're almost like trying to land him on the grid, but that looks pretty good there. Okay, the next thing we want to do is if we look in the lower right corner, let me resize Blender real quick. Okay, so now we can see down here there's triangles and it says 456,000. We need to simplify this down to under 200,000 to be able to use it for the animation step we want to do next. So what we're going to do is click on the mesh to make sure it's selected. Go over here to the wrench and add modifier. Go over to decimate, which is right here. Okay. This ratio is the percentage of how many basically triangles we want to be at when we're done decimating this model. Since it's at 456,000 and I want to go under 200,000, I'm going to go down to 40%. So I'll just click 0.4 here and hit enter. What will happen now is it will calculate this out and it will show me what the result would be, but it doesn't work until I apply it. Okay, so my triangles are down to 182,000, and decimation simplifies the model, but you don't lose too much with it, ideally. So I've got the model down to the simplification I want, and I've still got a 3D model. I'm going to click apply. The one thing to notice is the texture is actually not there. That's because I'm in a layout view. If I click on texture paint up here in the tabs, then it should show the texture show up. Okay, so I paused just to make that go a little bit faster, but now I can see what my character looks like textured and reduced, and everything looks okay. Definitely took a bit of a detail hit, but it's okay. It's where I want to be, especially because I'll make it dance next. If you want a higher res character and you're not going to animate it, you don't have to do these steps. But this is a very powerful thing to understand for reducing the complexity of any 3D model that you're working with to make it work better for, say, if you're going to put it into a gaming environment. Or even if you want to simplify it down for 3D printing, then decimation is a very handy tool to know. Okay, now that we've decimated the model and we've oriented the model, we're going to export the model. So we'll export it as an OBJ. Actually, we're going to export it as an FBX. And we will say, let's see, let's do Y forward and Z up for the forward and up things here. And we'll export it as this FBX. Let's see where this is going to go. Untitled FBX, that's fine. Next step, we will rig and 3D animate it. This is Mixamo. Mixamo is a website that is owned by Adobe now, and they are the best auto rigging solution I've found so far. Rigging is where you take a 3D model and you add what are called bones to it, and then the bones you can apply an animation to. The animation file just says, you know, move the right arm at this angle, this speed, and the bones get attached to the model, and that's what makes the model animate. So you don't say take the model that we have and actually move the arms around. You actually put bones inside of it, which is called rigging, and then you apply the animation to the bones. There's deformations and things that apply, and it actually gets quite complicated. But at the end of the day, this app is going to do most of the work for us. The first thing we want to do is, it looks like I mixed up something here. So we just want to have him face forward with the arms out and the legs here. So don't worry about it not being textured. We'll deal with that later. The next step is you just kind of mark the chin, and I'm going to get rid of use symmetry because he's not quite symmetrical. And we'll do the wrists. Just put one of these on each wrist, right and left. And this sample file here shows you where things go. Here's the elbows. Move that there. Knees. The groin one is interesting in that you don't put it at the tip of the groin, you actually put it up a little bit. So I tried to line the circle up with the bottom, and you can see that here. The groin one goes up a bit. Now what happens is you click next, and it is going to use basically a cloud rigging to animate the character. This character gets uploaded to the cloud, gets animated, or I'm sorry, gets rigged, and then comes down. Then we can apply animations. Now, I've already got the character here ready to go and rigged up. So now what we can do is click an animation, and yeah, now we can have some fun. So these are dance ones. And I can rotate around. If you click this camera, the camera will actually follow the character around. Can zoom in and out. Unfortunately, the previews aren't textured, but you can still get the idea of what you want to do here. Now, there's more than just dancing ones here. There are tons. Here's some combat ones. There's a taunt. You can just do this for hours. Here, let's see. These are sport ones. Some of these are boxing. Here's a golf putt victory one. So Mixamo just has hundreds of animations, and you can save the animations. Let's do a golf drive. This should be fun. You can save the character and the animation together, and what that allows you to do is then import it into something like Unity or Unreal, where you can also apply other animations, start basically creating a game with it. You can also import it into other tools. We're going to import it into an augmented reality tool, and you can probably see how we're getting to our what is this? Oh, a double leg takedown. To our final video here. Keep in mind, I've tried to rig a character myself, and I think I spent about 2 hours and still got it wrong. So the fact that this did this in a couple minutes on the internet by analyzing the figure was absolutely amazing. Now, one thing that helped was, what was that? Oh, a back squat. The character itself was in a T-pose. It has a obvious head, obvious arms and legs. So you can't really do this with like a dog toy or a toy that looks like a dog that has 4 legs, or a dragon or anything like that. It has to be humanoid is one of the limitations here. Once we have the character doing an animation that you want, let's go back to, let's see, there's dance. Fantasy ones normally have swords. Superhero ones are normally quite fun. And then also there's going to be, I mean, these are made for games, right? So you can have everything from impacts to attacks. Oh, that was pretty sweet. Okay, I'm going to quit playing with this and move on to the next step, which is we're going to export this. So we can say download. We can download it as an FBX. If you're going to move it in Unity, you can say FBX for Unity. And we'll say with skin because we want the mesh on there. I'll keep the rest of these default. And we'll download this and go on to the next step. So one last thing I want to go over, which will really light this thing up. When you export your file, you export it as an FBX file. Normally the FBX file has the textures embedded in it, but for whatever reason when Mixamo does this, I've had a lot of problems with other programs opening up the FBX files and not having the textures. If you go back to the Mushroom cache, which was our step 1, and you look for the texture files, you can find them there, and then all you want to do is copy them into the same folder as your FBX, and then just take all of these and zip them up together. So I'm going to add this to an, actually, I'm sorry, I think I can just right click and say 7-zip, yeah, add to 3D models.zip. And you'll get a zip file here. Then what I did is I took that and uploaded it to OneDrive. Once you have that file uploaded to whatever your cloud source is, I use OneDrive, you can use iTunes, I think you can use Google Drive or Dropbox. Then the app I'm using to actually view it and record it is this ARYZON AR Studio. I've tried loading the files into a couple of different things and haven't had success getting the textures to render. And this is one that was both available on Android and iOS. There's probably other great ones out there. Actually, there's a ton of stuff when you search for AR, but this one was very easy to use, and it was the free version allowed me to record the video that I showed you. I ended up purchasing it so that I could have more than 3 models loaded, but once you load the model into the cloud and then load it into that app, you can pull it up at random and use the AR system to render it and resize it. So for the final video, the final portion of this, I want to show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is what the final result looks like through the application. I want to give you guys a different video than what I started out with because I wanted to thank you for watching so long. Now, I didn't do this very carefully, so he kind of walks through furniture and stuff. I also did some experimentation with scaling him and rotating him as he was dancing just to see what would happen, and you'll see some tracking loss. This would probably be better if I had done it on a table or something closer than the floor. I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you learned a couple different techniques from this and have some ideas. I think taking this into the video game realm would be really fun. Also, the photogrammetry to 3D printing would be fun, so maybe those will be some future videos. If you want to see those, hit subscribe, and I'll try to get those out based on feedback. Just ask any questions in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'm Joe Farrow with Geek Toolkit, and this was a fun one to make, so hope you enjoyed it too.